Good afternoon and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 190 and I am continuing the stories from 1001 Arabian Nights, and especially the story that Jafar is telling to Harun al-Rashid, the story of the two Viziers. Now, it just so happened that, remember, Nur al-Din Ali had left. He'd left Cairo, Egypt, where he had been joint vizier to the king of Egypt. And he had gone off away. He was so angry with his brother. And he'd ended up in Basra. And he'd gone into the town, accompanied by the vizier for the king of Basra. And this vizier had just taken a liking to him and invited him home. He'd heard a little bit of his story that Nur al-Din had left from his home in Cairo because he had a quarrel with his family. And he appreciated who this young man was. So he invites him home, and in the morning they talk some more, and Nur al-Din shares more of his story with him, and the vizier just grows more and more fond of Nur al-Din. And he says to Nur al-Din, you know, I don't have a son, and you are like a son to me. I already feel this in my heart. And I wish for you to have everything that you could possibly want or need in this world. Now, it just so happens that I have a daughter, and she is of equal beauty to you. And many, many men have sought her hand in marriage, both eminent and rich. But I have turned them all away. None pleased me, but you do. And so, please, will you take my daughter, have her as your wife, and as your help servant in this life? And when I can, I will introduce you to the king of Basra, and I will recommend with all my heart that you take my place as vizier. Look at me, I am old. I can't do this anymore. I need to leave this behind and live the remaining days that I have in leisure, rather than struggling in this way that I do. Well, Nur al-Din, he bowed his head for some time. And then when he raised it, he turned to the vizier and he said, so be it. By the grace of God, so be it. And so the vizier, he got very excited by this. It was something in his heart was living that just made him feel like this was absolutely the right thing to have happen. And he immediately began to prepare his house for the wedding, which he planned to host that very night. Now, he invited people, prominent people in the town of Basra, for he was the vizier and very well known. And the house was decorated and food was procured and very carefully cooked, and his daughter was prepared to meet her soon-to-be husband, Nur al-Din Ali. And when all were assembled, the vizier turned to them and said, I have a brother in Egypt, and he had a son, and this son is now standing before you, Nur al-Din. And we had agreed that when our children were old enough, they would marry each other. And that day has come. we are celebrating the marriage of my daughter with my brother's son from Egypt, Nur al-Din. Now, everybody completely supported this union that was going to take place, and celebrating was grand indeed. And as was the tradition, when a couple was being married, the paperwork was drawn up, and this contract basically was signed. And once it was signed, then the marriage was, well, it needed to be consummated. The man and the wife needed to spend that night together. And usually what would happen is beautiful baths would be prepared for both the husband and the wife, and then they would be led into the bedroom chamber where they would spend their first night together as a couple. So Nur al-Din was taken to the baths, as was his soon-to-be wife, and he was bathed, and the vizier prepared for him the most elegant robes, befitting of, indeed, his position in life. For he was not a common person. He himself was a vizier, well-educated and well-positioned in life. Now, after the bath, he was brought into the bedroom with his wife, who he found to be an incredibly beautiful match for him. And interestingly, at the same time all of this was going on, Shams al-Din Muhammad, his brother, was being married as well in Cairo, Egypt. Now, returning to Shams, when he had returned from his 1-month trip to go to the pyramids with the king of Egypt, he came back and found his brother gone, and he was very upset indeed. And he knew that he had lost his temper, and he'd said things that were hurtful and not true. And he repented for this. He wished he had never said the things that he said, but he could not take them back. And because his brother was gone, he sent out people looking for him in all directions and could not find them. Now, at the same point in time, he was being married to a woman, the daughter of a merchant in Cairo. Same day, same evening, contract was drawn up, and he married this woman that was his equal as well. They consummated their marriage on the same time, and then later, it was amazing indeed. Yes, they both conceived a child at the same time, at the same day. Now, of course, those months passed, and once again, the amazing thing is, as the great Almighty had ordained it, they both had children at the same time. Now, Shams al-Din Muhammad, he had a daughter, and Nur al-Din Ali had a son. Now, before all of this had taken place, the vizier had taken Nur al-Din to meet the king. And when he was presented to the king, Nur al-Din said all the appropriate things that one would say when you're meeting somebody of high rank like the king. He bowed down, he kissed the ground in front of the king, he said all the appropriate things about enjoying a long life and ruling in peace and prosperity, and the king was delighted by Nur al-Din. The vizier introduced him as his son-in-law, and that he was and had been trained as a vizier, and the vizier informed the king that he wished to step down and leave his position to Nur al-Din. Well, the king had already taken a liking to Nur al-Din. I guess back in those days, people had better intuitions as to who it was they were actually meeting. And he felt very good about this young man, and it was coming from the recommendation of his vizier, who had served him well for all these years. Of course, he would take his advice. And he agreed to take Nur al-Din into his service as vizier. And there and then started Nur al-Din's service to the king of Basra. And that very day he began signing and drawing up documents, making sure all the affairs of state were in place and taken care of. Things went along quite well. Well, as I'd mentioned, his wife gave birth to a beautiful son. And his son, well, he was as beautiful and handsome and elegant as Nur al-Din had been in his youth. And of course, Shams al-Din Muhammad's daughter was equally as beautiful as Nur al-Din's son. And these two began to grow up, not knowing that either one existed. One in Basra, one in Cairo. Events almost identical in the beginnings of their lives. Now, we'll leave the story there and wonder as to what is going to happen next with these two young people. Could it be that God has in store for them to perhaps ever meet? We shall see. Hey, thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed and have a good rest of your day.